In 2014, the reruns of Samurai Jack begin to play on Toonami, an action-oriented programming block on Adult Swim. Now this sparked the speculation that the series might be returning. And in December of 2015, a teaser video announced that Jack would be coming back. Tartakovsky would return as the series' main creative force, and in fact, most of the original team returned. The show was able to reunite the main cast with Phil Lamar as Jack and John DiMaggio as the Scotsman. But unfortunately, because of the passing of Makoto Iwamatsu in 2006, who originally voiced the series' lead villain Aku, Tartakovsky at first considered using a completely different voice for the character.
I mean, Mako's passing was hard. I thought about first changing his voice to something completely different, but Aku is so special and his voice was such a part of it, I didn't want to kind of reboot it, So we got a guy who does a pretty good imitation. I mean, look, I'll be upfront, but nobody can replace Mako 100%.
Voice actor Greg Baldwin was brought in to mimic the original voice. Working with the small but intimate team allowed for a faster schedule and greater creative freedom, with the executive producer Mike Lazo giving the team minimal intervention. The show would also consist of 10 episodes instead of the usual 13, making it the shortest season. Creators of the show were also able to speed up the production time thanks to working on computers this time around instead of hamsters, according to character designer Craig Kelman. And while this wouldn't be a much anticipated announcement of a feature film, the announcement of the 5th season means that we finally get to talk about it.
For the last 10 years, we've been trying to develop a movie. And the movie never gets going, right? For whatever reason. And I was thinking, you know what? I have a little bit of free time before the next project, grabs me. And maybe I should just finish it the way it really should be done in a mini-series for television. And so I just wrote an email, and Lazo called me the next day, and then within 2 weeks the deal was done and we were off.
Unlike most cartoons from the early 2000s, this isn't a reboot, remake, or reimagining. This is a direct continuation of the series we grew to love and the characters we know. But with that being said, there is a distinct difference between Season 5 and what came before. The show is set in the distant future with more complex and mature themes, which is fitting since the fans of the show aged as well. This was all possible due to the network allowing Samurai Jack to have a mature rating with the use of blood on screen, while maintaining jokes and scenery that made the show unique in the first place. This season would also have a season-long narrative arc instead of episodic format. No longer would we receive standalone episodes, but we are going to witness the journey of Samurai from start to finish. This is further illustrated in the series titling of the episodes, or in this case, numbering. Each episode in the series is named using Roman numerals, suggesting a deliberate sequence of episodes. The last episode of Season 4 ended on the 52nd episode overall. But the first episode of the latest season doesn't begin with the numeral 53. Instead, it begins with XCII, which stands for 92. Now, this suggests that while Season 5 is set in the same universe, it will begin in the distant future as if the show's event continued, even if the show was not aired. Now, this is a unique idea, since it leaves the door open to the possibilities of similar adventures that Samurai Jack had over the years. But with that being said, let's explore what Season 5 has in store for us. Just a reminder from your friendly neighborhood geek, possible spoilers ahead. First, we are treated to a new introduction that establishes that the series is, in fact, set 50 years into the future, with Samurai still unable to complete his task. He also seemingly stopped aging, and his mental state begins to degrade due to the continual haunting of his past. The first few episodes basically establish why the show was so different from the other cartoons of its time. It has a slow but deliberate pacing, high-octane action scenes, and much welcomed character development. However, the show doesn't just rehash what made it popular, but expands on it. Having worked on the original series and the short-lived animated Clone Wars series, possibly the only good thing that came out of the prequels, Tartakovsky and his team once again prove why they are the best in the business when it comes to action cartoons. The action is fast, exciting, clever, and dramatic as ever. And you don't have to look any further than the very first fight of the series, in which Samurai Jack saves 2 creatures from an army of robots. The scene alone cemented that the showrunners knew how to keep the show true to itself while adding new elements. Notice how the letterboxes move to point out what's important in the shot. The exact same letterboxes would have been static in the original series. Adding movements and change in shapes adds extra flair to an old formula. Even small touches, like when Jack uses his machine gun, allows you to see the robot's lights shutting down. This scene is accompanied by a phenomenal score and familiar sound effects that are present throughout the entire season. You know, the show's score really deserves its own mention, since often cartoon scores are not very memorable outside of the main intro song. Samurai Jack is an exception to that, thanks to Genndy's ability and willingness to allow the score to be a part of the scene. Unlike other cartoons or even films, the team strays away from using temp music, but instead allows Genndy to act out sounds and music rhythm, which is then composed by Tyler Bates.
So then we've got Jack firing, and this will be all sound effects and the music. Let's go with the trigger, and then and that'll get real hardcore. And that will put it suspended. Kind of back into it.
This allows for the breaks in action and smoother pacing, leaving enough room for silence. The end result is some of the most memorable scores in all of cartoons. Now, the new addition was the series' more mature rating. In the past, Samurai Jack slashed evil spirits and robots and really any other mechanical creatures. And after a long battle, his entire body was covered in oil. This was mostly due to network restrictions, but when the show came back for its 5th season, it was allowed to do the one thing they could never do: show blood. This was one of the biggest fears getting back into Samurai Jack, because so often the series gets a more mature rating only to use gore and blood for shock value, eventually losing its impact. But other times, a clever use of gore and violence could be done with a purpose, and it was certainly done tastefully in Samurai Jack.
And there's definitely, a bit more violence, but I think we've done it in a way where it's true to the show.
What started as a simple restriction on the part of the network ended up being a major part of the character and played a major part in Season 5. The show's creators used this opportunity to explore Jack's psyche and mental state without making Jack a ruthless killing machine. When Jack meets with the daughters of Aku for the first time, it is safe to assume that he thinks they will be robots, just like the enemies he has faced time after time.
They are just machines.
So when he first stabs and sees it's a real human being, he is profoundly affected. This is a classic storytelling device of letting the audience know something that the main character is simply not aware of. At first glance, the sisters look just like any other robot. The only distinct features are their individual weapons and hairstyles, which don't help because of masks obscuring their faces during Jack's first meeting. Even the creatures that looked like they could have been organic still exploded once they had been slashed. And the organic beings that really were human weren't exactly a threat. Sometimes they served as allies. There were a few occasions when Jack had to face organic foes, but we never actually saw him killing anyone. Unless you count this death. Or this one. Okay, hold on, stop here. Samurai Jack did kill on a few occasions, but the show itself treats this as his first actual kill, so we can assume that this is his first canonical death. Yeah, we will operate under the assumption that this is his first kill of a real sentient being. The first time Jack slices a character leaves a lasting impression on him. It wasn't just another robot. This was something entirely new, not only to the audience, but to Jack himself.
If you can imagine the killing machines all your life, and all of a sudden you kill your first human.
Oh,
right?
wow.
And we don't just bypass it. We really have Jack think about it and have him react to it.
In fact, this puts a new spin on his fighting and psyche. In fear of taking another life, he momentarily considers purposefully losing the fight, but decides against it.
Maybe they will kill you. Or is that what you want?
Although taking another life impacts Jack, it never consumes him entirely, as we hear him offering the daughters of Aku a chance to abandon their mission.
Leave here now and live, or stay and face your destiny.
This act of humility is nothing new for a samurai who always puts the needs of others above his own. And even when pushed to kill the daughters of Aku, he still bears some of the guilt, despite trying to convince himself that this is the path they chose.
They chose the path! They chose!
This leads to the season's themes. Season 5 primarily touches on the distinct themes of identity, humanity, loneliness, and choice, the last being explored not only with Jack, but his countless enemies. You see, Jack is a human, an immortal, but human nonetheless, and he has to make choices. Who to save, where to go, and what to do. This is juxtaposed to his enemies, who are mostly machines, and while they are able to communicate and express different personalities, they are bound to their programming. At the end of the day, their mission is to kill Jack or die trying. But what if those machines weren't machines after all? What if they were human? After being raised with a singular purpose in life, what if they go against their intended programming? This theme is tied inherently with the last surviving daughter of Aku, Ashi. She was raised to be a ruthless killing machine with a boiling hate for Samurai Jack, who compares her to a machine.
I have met machines that are programmed with such hate and lies, but never a human.
And the last is loneliness. His environment once again acts as a secondary character. This time around, the show uses its captivating backgrounds to draw attention to Jack's crumbling sanity and isolation. He sees people who aren't there and hears voices that don't exist. At times, the show's minimalistic looks allow the creators to experiment with visual storytelling, some of which come in the form of callbacks to earlier episodes. In previous episodes, Jack often uses his environment to his advantage, but this time, it works directly against him, even if it is all in his head.
Please, no! You must understand!
That samurai has gone buku cuckoo.
This is further driven by the show's compositions, with Jack being lost and dwarfed in the vast detail backgrounds. And the seemingly quiet and peaceful surrounding is often morphed in his head, adding the sense of paranoia, guilt, and loneliness. In fact, the theme of loneliness and loss is the final note of the series, which leads the viewer to a bittersweet ending, even if the biggest hurdle of the series was its slightly rushed ending. It was gratifying to see Samurai Jack's influence long after he left those he helped. It also addresses the series' single-world continuity. Perhaps the world of Samurai Jack was never meant to be an interconnected world. The world building took a backseat to tell stories that would involve gangsters, underwater cities, and magical wish-giving pools. What doesn't make sense is how this world, that is primitive by contrast, has Spartans and technologically advanced dogs. But I mean, hey, I would be lying if I said it didn't bring warm feelings. In conclusion, the show retained its qualities that made it stand out in the first place. And if you wanted something different, try reading IDW's Samurai Jack series, written by Jim Zub and illustrated by Andy Suriano. And then you can write in the comments which one has a better ending. Hold on. Did you guys know that the original Samurai Jack was composed by will.i.am of the Black Eyed Peas? I mean, if you think that's interesting, then go find out more in our previous video on Samurai Jack, and don't forget to check out the links in the description. And please, for the love of Jack, stay awesome, geeks.